2023, so Happy New Year. It's our first meeting for this particular year. We start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand and join with me. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. Although emergency order number 12, as issued by Governor Sununu, has expired, the planning board allows board members to participate electronically, provided a quorum of the board members is physically present in the meeting room. Please note that if some of the members are physically absent, all votes taken shall be done by roll call. There is a contact number at the bottom of the DerryCAM, which will be coming up shortly, with a phone number where members of the public who do not want to physically attend the meeting can listen in and participate in the public hearing portion of the meeting. The access number was also posted along with the agenda. So again, the phone number to call in would be 646-558-8656, and the meeting ID 754-663-912. And what's it, star 6, when we open the public hearing, would be to raise your hand, or star 6 the other way?
Star 9, Mr. Chair. Star 9 to raise your hand, star 6 to mute and unmute.
Star 6 to mute, so to at least be on star 6 at this point in time to be muted. So I'm going to introduce before I introduce the members of the board here, for those in the audience, for safety, we do not use the elevator in case of emergency. We have an exit at the back of the room. There's an exit to my right on the side here. So if somebody needs some assistance getting down, somebody will be there to assist you get down the stairs. In addition to that, anybody that has, like me, electronic devices that aren't muted, if you would so do so, put them on silence. So with that, the introductions. We have the Director of the Planning Board, Mr. George Sioris.
Good evening.
We have the Town Administrator Representative, Mr. Andy Chase.
Good evening.
In the back, we have the Assistant Director, Liz Robidoux.
Good evening.
We have our replacement for Dave Grenice, who is working in Boston tonight, Mr. John Morrison.
Good evening.
And replacing Mr. McCaffrin, who is up North Country and can't make it down here in time, will be Mr. Richard Melleby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And going over to the far right, we have the man behind the curtain, Mr. Owen Provencher.
Good evening.
And then we have the town engineer, Mr. LaRue.
Good evening.
We have full board member, Mr. Connors.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And replacing Joe Temper at this point in time will be Mr. Feinauer.
Hey, good evening.
And our secretary is Mr. Nelson.
Good evening.
I'm John O'Connor, and I'm the chair. So with that, we will move on to escrows. Project name is Villages at Oakwood. Developer Lifestyle Homes of Derry, New Hampshire. Escrow account same. Escrow type letter of credit. Parcel ID location 08039 42 Schneidel Road. Please approve a final release of the letter of credit number 43340 drawn on Enterprise Bank in the amount of $201,171.60 for the above noted project. The amount to retain is $0.
Move to approve as presented.
So we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Motion passes, and they did a beautiful job up there. If anybody has had a chance to drive up in that area, very nice.
The builder's in the audience, Mr. Redmond.
Oh. Very nice. Moving on, where's my list here? On to correspondence. We have Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I think we skipped minutes, but there's not much in correspondence. There's just the planning board's submission deadline schedule for 2023.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the approval of minutes. These will be the minutes from the last time we met was December 7th, 2022.
Move to approve as written.
We have a motion to approve. We have a
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Morrison. Any questions, any changes, any adjustments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
Abstain?
name would be Mark Connors, and that's all that's on this list. So the motion passes. Going on to Planning Director, Chairman updates. I'm sorry, George, I didn't get a chance to see you. Do you have anything that you would like to bring up?
No, just for Owens, we've had a few abutters for this project, so they can't be here tonight, so they're going to Zoom in. So we gave them instructions to call in and Zoom. So you may have a few people out there tonight when we get to that plan on Drew Road.
Thank you, George.
Okay,
Yes, we
yeah,
do have quite a few attendees online.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the chairman has a couple of items I want to bring up. One is the renewal of applications for those that are on the board. We have 3 that are ending, so as of February 1st, you can go on the town line website and you can fill out an application if you wish to come back. And automatically would be, one that would be addressed would be the town administrator's position after the election, and then the town council's position. Our secretary's term, March 31st, 2023 is up. Our vice chair also is up, and I think I've pretty much covered it, and Charlie Foote.
And Mr. Feinauer, I think, is up in 2023. I could be wrong.
Oh, I didn't see it down there. Okay. So if you want to come back on, you fill it out again. So the other item I want to bring up, the town also has a committee called Net Zero, and they have a position on Net Zero committee for the chairman of the planning board. And I've been attending these meetings for a long period of time. And as a former state legislator, I helped write the regulations for what's called net metering for solar power. And the chairman did a presentation to the town council last night, and part of the solar panel that's going to be going over the former landfill area is signed contract, ready to go forward. And to show how much savings, just at this point in time, most of us are probably paying 22 cents a kilowatt. We've got a contract with this company for our solar panels that was signed in February of last year at 6 cents a kilowatt for 25 years. So just the progression of the 22 cents every single year going forward, the savings could be immense. The other thing is we're looking also to work with the school systems and trying to see how we can help the school systems save money. And that's where one of the biggest bangs are. There's another thing that's coming up, and it's on the town website. And it's an event that you can either show up physically here after you do an application, or you can watch it virtually on TV. And it's called Clean Energy and it Lowers Bill with Community Power. It's brand new, where so far about 22 towns are getting together, and as a conglomerate of group of people, they go out and buy our power ourselves. So we're just getting into it, just reviewing it. The state legislation is rewriting some of the rules and regulations towards that there. So it could be a huge benefit to the town over and above what we've already done with the solar panels going out there on the landfill. So, and that is Tuesday, January 24th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And it's being hosted by Derry here. I think it's got also, Mr. Provincial, would that be videotaped? And
Yes, DerryCAM is proud to co-host that event. We will be interactive online via Zoom and also broadcast on TV and our online platforms.
okay, excellent.
More info on DerryCAM.org.
Okay, now we're going to go into the public hearing. Shade Tree Farm LLC, PID 07084, 66 Drew Road. It's an acceptance and review. It's a 4-lot subdivision and the creation of 3 frontage lots. So, George, take us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real briefly, as you indicated, the applicant, Shade Tree Farm, the actual owner is Gino Spiro. The process is located at 66 Drew Road. Again, the purpose of the plan is for a 4-lot subdivision located in the low-density residential district. That part of town requires a 3-acre minimum lot size. There will be 3 frontage lots created. 2 of the lots are brand-new lots. Single-family only is permitted. The 3rd lot has the existing home that was built in the last year or so. And then the remaining 4th lot is the 65 acres to the rear of these lots, as well as extending over into Hampstead. Upon further review after the TRC meeting, staff recommended that the lots be reconfigured to what you see tonight, to have the existing house be on one of the smaller lots versus the overall larger 65 acres. Staff felt this configuration allowed for better site distance, which Mark can speak to, as well as not knowing what the future will be of the 65 acres. If that parcel is developed, it would go through the hearing process and the abutters would be notified. All town departments have signed and reviewed the plan. There is a waiver request of various things of soil mapping, wetland erosion control, traffic impact, which I'll let Tim speak to. They have applied for state subdivision approval at New Hampshire DES. We have a copy of the application in the file. The approval is pending. Staff would recommend approval of both the waiver request and the subdivision application. And as I indicated earlier, we've had several calls from the abutters who can't be here tonight for various reasons. They are Zooming in tonight. Most of them have indicated that they just want to see the plan and what it's about. A couple said they had no opposition, so we may have more out there, and I know there's a few in the audience. So given that, I'll turn over to Tim Peliquin, who's the surveyor.
Great.
Welcome, Mr. Peliquin.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Yep, so for the record, my name is Tim Peliquin, a licensed land surveyor. My company is Promised Land Survey in Derry, and I am here representing Shade Tree Farm, LLC, the owner named Gino Spiro, who's the manager of that LLC. So it's a large tract of land and extends all the way to the Hampstead town line, comprising about 75 acres, and two of the lots were merged recently because one of the lots was attached to a lot in Hampstead for its frontage, and now that lot got sold out on the Hampstead side on Route 121. So these 2 lots got merged. Now it's going to be proposed as comprised of 65 remaining acres and 3 3-acre lots subdivided on Drew Road. One of the lots having an existing home, and the remaining 65-acre lot would have a 50-foot frontage, but it would also have a 200-foot legal frontage in an area that you cannot put an access for a driveway based on the fact of site distance at that point, or not, I should say, not an ample point without major road reconstruction and other things. So the idea would be we place these 2, I'm going to call them the 2 new lots, 84-1 and 84-2, the 2 3-acre lots, which maybe I'll highlight here. Thank you for bringing that up, in this area. So there's 2 lots there, as well as that 50-foot right-of-way, which all represent an area that you can get ample legal site distance. And when I say site distance, I should actually be calling it stopping site distance, right? A little bit different than the state AASHTO regs of site distance. This is site stopping distance, where, just for the record, it's a half a foot above grade, 10 feet off the roadway, seeing a site in the travel lane of the distance that's required based on the speed limit of the road, seeing an object of 3.5 feet. So it's basically if a car is coming down the road and there's a bouncing ball that's going across the road and a child's chasing it, that's the idea, that the driver would have ample opportunity to stop. So these are the two areas, or 3 areas for 84-1, 84-2, the 2 3-acre lot, and then the 84-3, which is the 65-acre lot, where its right-of-way meets. All 3 of those meet safe stopping site distance. And we kind of went back and forth on that with the town to prove it out, and finally came up with this plan. At one point, I would tell you this plan comparably came before you maybe a year or more ago, not by me, but by another surveying firm, and I believe they had 5 lots proposed, just for the record. We've whittled this down to 3 because that's really what it is in terms of safe site distance. That's our proposal. It's relatively simple at this point. I know the question may come, what are you doing with the 65 acres? Well, what I would tell you is that right now that's just one building lot, and that's maybe all it will ever be, to be really honest. It could be a farm. It could be a nice lot that could just get sold off as one building lot, because the cost for a new roadway to put through there and the distance that you can get, and there's wetlands back there and stream crossings and other things, and it's just, it may not be viable. In the future, who knows what can happen, but right now the idea is just he wants to subdivide off 2 road frontage lots and sell them as such, and the remaining lot is a 65-acre lot. That's the long exhortation. I'll gladly pause and answer any questions the board would have, or perhaps members of the public as appropriate. Thank you.
Typically, we go through the acceptance of jurisdiction.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to accept jurisdiction of the subdivision plan before the board for Shade Tree Farm LLC, parcel ID 07084, 66 Drew Road.
Second.
Do we have a motion? We have a second. Starting with Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Morrison.
Yes.
Mr. Mallaby.
Yes.
Mr. Clonish.
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer.
Yes.
Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we've accepted jurisdiction. Now we go into determination of regional impact.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move pursuant to RSA 36:56 that the board finds the proposal as presented at this time meets the definition of a development of regional impact, and I will also, as part of discussion, direct the members to the memorandum on this issue from planning staff.
We have, yes, Mr. Connors?
Do we just discuss it now, or do we have to?
Do you need a second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, you have a question now?
Yeah, I guess, so I'm concerned on the regional impact thing. I guess the map that we have on the larger drawings here shows the lot and then the long kind of skinny piece going over to Hampstead line. In the memorandum that talks of where we're recommending that it's not a regional impact, it seems that that's broken up into 2 lots for some reason, and I guess I was questioning that, and also the fact that the developer, Tim just mentioned that this does run over to the Hampstead line, so why would this not be a regional impact, I guess would be my question, since it does touch another town line.
Well, I think after the public hearing.
Liz has her hand up.
So,
You want to answer
Yeah.
that? Because part of that, I think, was already corrected back a while ago last year, right?
and to answer the first question, our GIS mapping has not caught up with the voluntary merger of the 2 lots.
Okay,
So that's why it's still shown as 2.
that's 2, okay.
It was November last year, right?
Okay.
And
So it is, the larger maps are accurate, this is going to be one big,
that is
long lot,
correct.
okay?
That is correct.
All right.
Yes.
And that lot does not then extend over to 121 into Hampstead, though? I thought that was contiguous to 121.
There's a town line that runs at the end of that parcel, but it doesn't hit 121 to the best of my knowledge. So there's land between that town line and 121.
But I guess what we have is,
Belongs in Hampstead, which is not part of the Derry lot. They use the Derry lot line as the boundary for the,
but is it two physical separate, so there's a property, there's a town line, but is it, so there's one lot in Derry, one lot in Hampstead, but is it actually owned by the same developer, is my point? That, the only reason there's a line there is it's a town line, so therefore it would, in my mind, have a regional impact if it's really one property.
I believe that's the lot, Tim will correct me, but I believe that's the lot in Hampstead where the white farmhouse is on, and that transferred to a different party.
Yes, he does not own land in Hampstead
Okay,
within this locus.
okay.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, indeed, it does appear that one of the existing lots of record, which is remaining, does abut a town line, but the subject of this hearing is some new lots that are being carved out of that, which do not. So I'm going to interpret the development directly adjacent to a municipal boundary being the subject of the plan before us tonight, as opposed to grandfathered existing lots of record that also may meet that direct abut to municipal boundary.
Okay, so we're just talking about the regional impact right now, then we'll ask other questions later, so, right, okay. All right, if that's the interpretation and that's what the staff recommends, that's fine, I just,
You'll have an opportunity to ask questions now.
okay, that's fine, as long as, if everybody thinks it's not regional, I'm good
So
with that.
we have a motion on the floor, we have a second on the determination of the regional impact. Starting with Mr. Chase.
No, it does not meet the definition of regional impact.
Mr. Morrison.
No, for the same reason.
Mr. Malby.
No, for the same reasons as Mr. Chase.
Mr. Connors.
I'm just wondering, is this the one where we're supposed to answer the opposite way? Should we be saying yes, actually?
We say no.
We're supposed to be saying no, okay, no.
No.
No. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
And no, I see no regional impact.
The chair will go along with that also, so that regional impact passes. And now we need to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I would move to open the public hearing.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, wait a minute, do we have a second?
Need a second?
Somebody jump up.
Sure.
Second?
Second.
Thanks.
We got a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstain? The public hearing is open. Anybody wishing to speak on here, and we're going to take the members from the audience first, and then we'll go into the computer, because I believe there may be somebody on there, and those that would like to speak, that's on the virtual and at home, that would be raising your hand.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Raising your hand, and
Wish
if you're
to
dialed
speak.
in on phone, press *9 to raise your hand.
So it's *9 if you want to speak. So anybody from the audience wishing to speak, please come forward, state your name and your address. Seeing nobody coming forward,
Seeing none, rise online, Mr. Chair.
nobody's online, raising online.
Nobody's raising their hand online, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we need a,
Motion to close the public hearing.
we have a motion to close public hearing. We need a second?
Second.
We have a second to close. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion passes. The public hearing is now closed. We'll ask Tim to come back and answer any of the questions that the board members have. The first one I have is, you have to update me on the fire department. Are they required either a cistern in an area that there's no fire hydrants, or can they choose to have an in residence sprinkler system?
Yes, we have voluntarily noted on the plan in note number 8, new lots shall voluntarily be equipped with a fire suppression sprinkler system constructed in accordance with all applicable codes. NFP 13A, 13D. All new lots shall comply with the guidelines of LDCR 170-30 in reference to the protection/suppression. So there you go. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, board members?
Do we need to open the public hearing first and then come back to the board, or is that?
We opened it and closed it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We did it and closed it. Nobody spoke.
Oh, that was quick.
No, Mr.
So I have a question that shows up best on the overall map, sheet 1. It's labeled Drew Road, and then there's a Y. Which of those continuations is actually Drew Road?
Yeah, good question.
And what is the other one?
It's actually North Shore Road, right? I believe.
No.
No,
What is
It's
it?
just a little stub,
Yeah.
like a driveway.
Wait.
Driveway?
Yeah. It is a little dirt road, but it's, yeah.
I went the wrong way. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. The reason I remember is because I think the zoning board gave a variance on one or maybe both of those houses several years ago because it was a dirt driveway, as Mark said. So that is not a town road, it's a private drive.
Yeah.
I'm going to label it as such on the plan, which is a good note. Thank you. Label.
It does lead across the town line, which is interesting, so, yeah, that's the thing.
Mr. Chase?
Just a small note on here, on your 50-foot right-of-way, Tim. It
Yes.
says access for map 11, lot 84. Shouldn't that say map 7, lot
84.
84-3?
Yeah, so where do you see that? Because I see the
Page 2,
page 2.
down at the
Okay.
bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Coming in off Drew Road, it shows your 50-foot access road.
Yeah.
And it says access for lot, map 11, lot 84. It should
Yeah.
be 784-3.
Yeah, 7 versus,
Yeah, we originally had that as Lot 84.
I know, but it's changed.
And it got changed by the fire department, so
Yeah.
thank you. Excellent notation. Good catch.
well,
I
it's more,
appreciate
it's
that.
more the map number 2, 7
Yep.
versus 11.
Yep, indeed.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
So I guess my question is related to what was just asked by Randy. So you just mentioned that back lot really isn't going to be, developable or further split. It might be nice for a farm and all that, but then you've got a 50-foot road put in between two of these new lots, which leads me to believe that there is further subdivision. I mean, why would do you need that kind of access for just a driveway to a single farm or family home? Because that seems to be telling me there's more development coming.
Sure. It's an excellent question, and I represented it the way that I know that I've talked to the owner and the way this was planned out, so I'm not speaking in untruth. However, it's also good stewardship to put a 50, because you don't know what can happen, right?
Well, and I guess
10
that's-
years on the road or anything.
Yeah.
Could be a little cul-de-sac in there, but I will tell you, there's only so far you can go. If you look at the cover sheet, I'll just give you an example. On the cover sheet, 1,800 feet is, 2,000 feet is the length, right?
Yep.
So there's only so far you can go. There's wetlands, there's streams, and various things. Environmentally, you can probably still put it in, but you're only getting up to...
Also in a flood zone, too.
There's a prime wetland to one side, so you're working against that as well. And then there's this long, narrow piece all the way to Hampstead Town Line. This is 3-acre zoning. That's a 500-foot between there.
Yep.
With a 50-foot road. I'm not going to be able to do the math really quick, but you're going to have like 700, 800 feet of frontage to try to create these 3-acre lots. To
So-
build a road as such, you can't.
Okay.
It doesn't
Again, I think one of the things that I've just, learned from being on the board is it does seem like all we need to do is talk, or all we really can do is talk about what the plan in front of us is, which is adding 2 lots or 3 lots. But it's clear that in some cases there are future plans. So, I just like to try and open the eyes of the board and to us to make sure that, we know what we're really voting for here. Because to me, it would seem like those lots should probably be together. The lot lines should touch. There should be 2 lot lines there. Just to the left of the lot that's being created on Drew Road, there's the lot is a little funky in that it overlaps the one that's on the road, but there is some frontage there, right? And what is that? There's about 50 or 100 feet right on the end there?
So you're talking right here?
Yeah, right down there.
Yeah, so there's 200 feet of frontage right here.
So that technically could be another developable lot.
Well, no, because that's the frontage for Lot 84-3 without a variance.
But we've got the driveway now. You just said we got a 50-foot road that's going to that
This
lot
lot
too.
actually has, so it has 200 feet right here, and it shows up on sheet 3 real good, because I basically dimensioned that. That's exactly 200 feet.
Before it goes onto that other property?
Correct.
So the full length of that's 400 feet, basically, of that
Well,
line?
I don't know, this lot is funky, the way it's written, and the
Yeah.
way, this is a stone wall when it comes in through there, so there's a funky lot, but there's 200 feet of frontage right here for this back lot,
So then why do they need the 50-foot road between the two?
because you don't have sight distance. You
So they can't
cannot
put a
driveway here.
Gotcha. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yep. And so the reason, so full disclosure, I mean, just in discussion with my client, he's looking to subdivide these two lots as quickly as he can. He has buyers and whatnot, and that's fine. But he also has a dream to build on this land one big estate home for himself and da-da-da-da, and have a little farm and whatnot. And if he can do that, that's great. But I can't ascertain that that's a fact, but that's what he's asserted to me. And Mark knows this, we've talked a little bit ad nauseum, that because of the difficulty of sight distance of this part, if good planning would have been just not bang out a road, but put a road in here of 2,000 feet, divide up 10, 12 lots, and be done with all one point of access right there. But that's not what we're doing here, so that's what he wanted to do.
Okay.
So,
Yep, just asking the questions. Thank you.
financial sense, and it might work that he's just got these two, ideally, right? If he's just got these two lots, one big estate house in the back.
Has a right to do it. I just was questioning. I always like to try and look at the big picture and down the road. That's all. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Any other board members requesting any questions? Now, you also, that land also abuts some conservation land too, correct?
Yes. I think is that lot 62? I think this is conservation, but I'm going to check right now.
And then along with the FEMA issue as far as the flood zone.
Yep, we're staying way out of the flood zone, way out of the prime
75.
wetland. Part of this whole plan is all that prime wetland and floodplain will be on that 65-acre lot.
And you want to discuss the waivers?
Yes. So you want me to read them?
We're going to probably take them one at a time.
Sure.
Board members. And
We will read them as written here when we make the motions, but what we'd like you to do is tell us why it's the right thing to do to grant them. What's the reason?
All right, I appreciate that, Mr. Nelson and Mr. Chairman. So we're asking not to show the whole parcel on one parent parcel. This has been surveyed, the whole piece, by another firm, and I'd prefer, but I've done enough survey to ascertain that this is entirely accurate, and I know that this piece is 65.33 acres, plus or minus, a little bit, but I'm asking not to put meets and bounds around this whole piece, because the concentration's right here. Anything that got developed in this in the future would need that full. So I'm asking to just show this overview as such, and enough detail to show just these lots that are going to be monumented and figured for development. So that's why I'm asking for a waiver on the entire parcel. I'm asking for wetlands on the entire parcel to be waived. They did show on the former surveyor's plan, both the wetlands and the soils within this information. So I'm asking waivers on that. Drainage calculations, as these are just 3 single-family lots of 3 acres, so I'm asking for a waiver on any drainage, and as well as erosion control plans, being single-family lots on 3 acres. Asking for a waiver on the traffic impact statement because it's minor, as 3 new single-family homes on an existing public way. And that's the basic gist of it. So Because the waivers are mostly on the 65-acre remaining lot that is not on the table for full development at this time.
Okay, now, before we vote on them, I want to go to Mr. LaRue and see what, any additions that he wants to add to this, or any concerns?
Nope, I believe that we've gone over the site distance issues fairly thoroughly. I mean, the road, that portion of Drew Road has a lot of challenging vertical and horizontal curve alignments that make it difficult to achieve, and that's why he had to scale back those driveways, which I initially believe was the case with the initial submission from last year.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Connors?
Yeah, I guess maybe just for Mr. LaRue, since we've read the waivers, I know we're going to go through them once, or each one, but I guess a few of them I don't necessarily have an issue with, but knowing, like you just mentioned, the topography, we're not worried about drainage into the road or erosion control into the road there because of the topography of these lots being, I think there's some significant height.
Well, there's going to be some alterations to the driveway access points. May require a culvert, and that can be mitigated fairly easily with what's proposed on the details of the plan.
So they don't need a whole formal
Right.
calculation plan. You're confident you can take care of that with site
Yep.
stuff? Okay.
Yeah,
thank
and we even added the easement, slope easements in the event that they do use that as the main access, which is the only spot you can tell with the two driveways and the main access to the main point of the lot, that's the only area that has a good level of sight distance. And we have slope easements in there in the event that they develop, that they can actually tie in to because there's going to be a big mound that they would have to traverse to get a road in.
Right, so they would have to cut that probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was why, yeah, that's why, you see the topography lines, it's pretty steep right off the road, and I
Yeah.
just was thinking,
Yeah.
that's a lot of
I
sheet
did
flow and
today,
stuff
and
down to the
that,
road,
Yep.
so my concern was, as long as you're managing that and, trust you to do your job, so if we don't need formal stuff, that's fine with me, but just something to keep an eye on.
Okay, seeing that, then let's have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to grant a waiver to LDCR Section 170-24.A, paren 4, to not depict the boundary of the entire parcel given the size of the parcel. After review of the waiver request, the board finds that strict conformity to the regulations would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second?
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes?
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that first waiver is done.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to grant a waiver to LDCR Section 170-24.A, paren 13, to not map the wetland for the entire site as wetland information is shown from approved plans obtained from the Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and other sources. After review of the waiver request, the board finds that strict conformity to the regulations would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to spirit and intent of the regulations.
We have a motion.
Second.
We also have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And the chair also, yes also, so that one passes.
Mr. Chairman, I would further move to grant a waiver to LCDR Section 170-24.A, paren 14.
It actually should be LDCR.
It's a typo.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Just,
cool. Thank you, Mark.
wow.
LDCR Section 170-24.A, paren 14, do not provide drainage calculations as the proposal is only for 3 additional road frontage, single-family lots. After review of the waiver request, the board finds that the specific circumstances relative to the plan or conditions of the land in such plan indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes, based on our town engineer's comments on that situation.
And Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And chair votes yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would further move to grant a waiver to LDCR Section 170-24, paren 15, to not provide an erosion control plan in details as the proposal. Did I just read that one? No.
No, you're right.
That was the reason.
As the proposal is for
Oh, okay, so that one is drainage and this one's erosion control. Very good. As a proposal is for 3 additional road frontage single-family lots. After review of the waiver, the request, the board finds that the specific circumstances relative to the plan or conditions of the land in such plan indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Second.
We have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malaby?
Yes.
Mr. Corners?
Yes, and again, based on, the fact that the town will monitor, where silt fences and such are needed during the project, so there's no wetlands or street impact.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, too.
And finally, Mr. Chair, I would move to grant a waiver to LDCR Section 170-24, paren 18, to not provide a traffic impact statement as the proposal is for 3 additional road frontage lots for single-family homes. After review of the waiver request, the board finds that the specific circumstances relative to the plan or conditions of the land in such plan indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malaby?
Yes.
Mr. Corners?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes also. So that completes the...
Mr. Chairman, there is one more.
Finding of fact.
Yep.
There's one, wait a minute.
HIS mapping.
Yep. If you look at Tim's letter, there is a soil mapping one, high-intensity soil mapping.
All right. In the package, where is that?
Probably 3 or 4 pages in, David. It's going to say a letter from Tim dated January 3rd, which staff would support the high-intensity soil mapping waiver.
Where the hell do you see that?
It's okay.
I saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Randy, thank you. We have no objection to that waiver, Mr. Chairman.
Do we got to read it, though? What is it?
It's,
All right, I see it. Sorry, but one more. Mr. Chairman, I would move to grant a waiver to LDCR Section 170-25, Articles B and C, high-intensity soil mapping for the entire site.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
yes.
Mr. Malaby?
Yes.
Mr. Corners?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And now we go into finding of fact.
Let me get back there.
Want me to read that, Mr. Chair? or-
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and stumble through it?
Move to find the proposed plan provides safe and efficient vehicular access, and the design and construction of the driveways are adequate to accommodate the anticipated volume of traffic proposed by the development. Each of the lots has adequate frontage and meets the frontage requirements for the zone. For those design elements that cannot be met for the plan, waivers have been approved by the board.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malaby?
Yes.
Mr. Corners?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's good. Approve pursuant to.
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the plan before us tonight pursuant to RSA 676:4, Roman 3, expedited review with the following conditions. Subject to the owner's signature, subject to on-site inspection by the town's engineer, establish escrow for the setting of bounds or certify the bounds have been set, establish escrow as required to complete the project, note approved waivers on the plan, obtain written approval from the planning director or designee that the GIS disk is received and operable and it complies with LDCR Section 170-24.c. Subject to the receipt of applicable state or local permits relating to the project, conditions precedent shall be met within 6 months. Submission of the appropriate recording fees payable to the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds. This includes the $25 LCHIP fee, recording fees for the Mylar, and notice of decision.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Going on with Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Malaby?
Yes.
Mr. Corners?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Mr. Pellington?
Thank you so
Ready
much
to
for
go?
your time
As usual,
and
very nice
professional responses, and I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we now move into a workshop mode. And the first workshop discussion is the workshop number 3, to set a date for a planning board district walk related to the proposed changes to the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, Article 6, District Provisions, Section 165-49, Traditional Business Overlay District, specifically the dimensional requirements of the district. And I think George was putting a few things together as far as the potential dates
Yeah, the only thing we're going to do tonight is is pick a date.
on that one.
Yeah, we were hoping we'd have some snow, but a couple of things. We can't, staff can't make the 28th Saturday, that would be the earliest, January 28th, but staff can't make that, so we were thinking either February 4th, February 11th, or February 25th, like that, those Saturday mornings. Even if we don't have snow, John and I were talking about this evening, there was a fire or some kind of,
Yeah.
right here, right across the street from where the house is on the corner here. So about 6:30, we saw the engines over there. And John said he drove near there and how narrow it was. And I'll let John speak to that. But that's a classic example of how narrow that road is. And this happened last year. There was a fire when we had the snowbanks up that high last February, and the engine could barely get through there. So I think it's helpful to look at those side streets, and given what happened tonight, that kind of reaffirms like we need to pay attention to the setbacks. So based on the people that weren't here, we'd like to do that on a Saturday morning and walk through a few of the streets, particularly on the north side of Broadway.
So, Mr. Stewart, can you rattle off those dates one more time?
Yeah, I'm
please?
sorry. We're not going to do January 28th because staff will not be available. So we're thinking either February 4th, the 11th, or the 25th.
11th of the month.
There's a 3-day weekend in there, the 18th, which is President's Day weekend. We don't want to do that. So the 4th, the 11th, or the
I
25th.
just would remind the board that the 4th is the Derry School District deliberative session for anyone who would want to attend that, so maybe we should not conflict with that date.
Good catch. Yeah.
Or do it later in the day, but, yeah. What, I guess, I'm sorry, I may have missed this. So the purpose of walking it was to see how narrow the streets are, but what in relation to?
Also the setbacks, whether or not neither houses looking where they are now in their position.
Because we're thinking of changing something related to those setbacks, is that what we're saying? So we want more or less setback, is that what we're?
Well, I think we didn't make a decision. The last couple of workshops, I know, Mark, you couldn't make it, but
Yeah.
it really hit home. We had where that fire is in the house that had
Can't
the fire.
rebuild right now, right?
So Mark and Liz can attest, that we have looked at various versions of that plan based on the current zoning of having either a 0 setback or a 5-foot setback. And it doesn't work really well in the real world once you start to look at it, particularly at this intersection because you have a 3-way road there. There's safety issues there. You throw in the mix of the houses closer to the road, the fire engines, I've seen cars parked on both sides of the road when I go to Cumberland and get a coffee some mornings. So we want to look at it in person. So we're thinking of maybe having to look at the setbacks, because what we ended up doing is we took the traditional business overlay, which is probably great for Broadway with 0 setback.
Yeah.
It may not apply or work in the real world on these side streets. So we need to look at that again.
So they currently are now 0 because they're in the traditional.
Yeah, I mean, we saw everything from decks out to the side of the street, literally hanging right to the 0 lot line, to a whole bunch of issues came up.
So everything that's there, though, is grandfathered. It would only be for a situation like that particular lot where they're trying to rebuild and now they need to conform?
Well, that's, yeah, I don't want to single out, in the real world, you're right, that lot where that fire was in that house, no matter what happens, if we never changed the zoning and just left it the way it was, that house to be built either would have to have been built within 12 months of the day of the fire on the existing footprint. Anything else would have required variances. That's a tough intersection. So when we looked at the other houses on the road, we said, this is not a good situation. There are no sidewalks there. So we're just trying to say, do we need to look at it again? So that was the purpose of the site walk, because in the dead of winter, again, hoping to have snow, when we see the piles, that would be a good way to look at it.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, I've been out there, I'm familiar with it. I guess this is where I would kind of rely on staff recommendation and engineering. I don't know that I need to go see that it's tight, because I already know it's tight, and I think we all do. So to me, it would be, what do you guys recommend? And then we vote on it. But if we need a sidewalk, we need a sidewalk.
Yeah, no, I think Dave had his hand up too. I'll let Dave
Mr.
speak.
Nelson here.
Yeah, so I think there was a fairly good summary of all the concerns and the discussion back and forth in the minutes.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Basically, what it comes down to is when we enacted the original traditional business overlay district, it was a result of, district walks and multiple design charrettes and multiple sets of community input, and we knew that corridor very well. I suggested that we do a district walk because I'm concerned that, like when we expanded the TBOD sort of sight unseen to these side streets, there were unintended consequences. And I think that in order to do good due diligence for this, we need to walk the district and see in what ways is it unique? In what ways is it different from the TBOD? In what ways are the streets on the north side of Broadway different than the ones on the south side? So I think we need to do that. We voted to do it. We just need to set the date.
Okay.
And it's not clear to me that the solution we do for the streets on the north side would necessarily be the same as those on the south side. And one of the big points you brought up is, whatever we change is not really going to be effectuated until there's some sort of rebuilding or redevelopment. And I think we use the term, sawtooth lots, randomly setbacks would change as redevelopment happened. And we needed to think about how that would affect a streetscape of an expanded, downtown.
Right. Yeah, and I think we did discuss it a little bit when we did that. It wasn't just kind of blind. And I think what we were saying is that we were focused on new development and having it go back from Broadway, and that, we were looking for that kind of redevelopment. And my thought at that time is some of those little side streets and stuff might even, perhaps go away and different things like that long term. So yeah, I get it. But if we want to go rezone it again, that I'm up for it.
The other thing too, I know we're getting sidetracked, but at least if we can do this sidewalk, because it's not equipped, but the zoning board had to give variances for that house on the corner where the fire was, and I'm not sure we want to keep, code enforcement, Bob Mackey will tell you, they don't want to keep sending people to the ZBA to do setback variances, because it's not good. It's better to have it allowed or not allowed in the zoning, so.
All good, thank you.
I guess my suggestion on dates would be that we're more likely to have snow on the 28th than any of the other dates.
Staff can't make it, unfortunately, David, on the 28th, that's why.
And McCacker and I can't make it on the 28th. We got an all-day
I'm sorry,
session down in
I meant the
Mount Salem.
25th.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I flipped to the wrong month.
We can do any of those dates in February work for staff, so it's up to the board, whatever date you want.
The 11th was sounding good. What was on the 4th? You said there was something special.
School district meeting.
Yeah, I mean, if we did it late in the afternoon, it probably wouldn't conflict, but I think that
School
starts at
district
10.
meeting starts at 10 a.m. The school district meetings start at 10, the district meeting at 10 a.m.
Is it on the 4th?
It's on February 4th at 10 a.m.
School.
Yep.
Well,
The 21st.
Yeah, a lot of us need to be there.
Can't do the 21st.
Just get the amendments.
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm out of the week. I'm out of town almost every weekend in February, so don't count on me anyway. So I apologize for sidetracking us. I just looked at my calendar.
We'll ask Owen to follow us with the Minicam.
Mr. Chairman, we can do the 21st too. I'm sorry,
And I'm
David.
familiar with the streets there.
We can do, staff can also do February 21st. I know that's President's Day weekend if people go away, but staff would be available on that Saturday, the 21st, if you want to do that weekend as well. I'm sorry, the 18th of February.
Oh, I was going to say the 8th.
February, no, January,
No, not January.
Yeah, we can't do the 28th of January.
the 21st?
That's the Saturday.
Right.
Well, today's the 18th of January, so no, we can't do that.
No, I said the 21st. There'll be plenty of snow the 21st.
Well, there's a fire truck sitting out there tonight too, so.
So we're targeting for the 11th?
It's up to you guys.
Why don't we just put the stake in the ground and say the
I mean,
11th?
seriously, we always have snow by middle.
Please,
We
we
always
always-
get like, don't we get like 1 or 2 good snowstorms seriously every year, like around Valentine's Day in the middle of February? Traditionally, you get a good snowstorm in that time.
Going to snow tomorrow and Friday, do it this
I
weekend.
know. Every time Channel 9 News, it's going up and up even more.
All right, so what would be, like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock? AM?
Yeah, what's the date?
On the 11th?
11th, right?
Okay, the 11th at 9 o'clock is 9 fair. It gets up, it's not too early, but not too late.
George is bringing the donuts?
I'll bring donuts. I go to Heavenly Donuts, as staff can attest to. Nothing against Duncan, but if there's a, seriously, if there's a blizzard or a really bad storm, obviously we'll let you know and
Now,
we'll
we do
email
this as a
everybody out.
public notice, right?
Yeah, we have to put
So
a public
we
notice.
could have a group of people following us.
Yep. And we put a public notice out, we put it on the town webpage and put it all over Facebook and everything, so.
When we did Exit 4A a couple of years ago, we
Yeah. You know, like David said real quickly, give yourself some time because you want to walk the north, like David said, and we said on the board earlier, the north side of Broadway, those side streets are a lot different from the south side.
Yeah.
Down Abbott Court, Central, Wall Street, Railroad Ave, they're not the same. So you're going to see a big difference.
So you're walking both sides of Broadway, the whole district.
Yeah, basically.
I think we want to do that.
So just where you mentioned you might have a crowd, do you need a police escort then for that too? Just a thought.
We have beacons to cross Broadway, Mark, thank you, on the rail trail in front of Sabatino. So that's seriously, that's a safety thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, just bring it in. Just a thought.
We'll park in the municipal parking lot here, and then we can start walking from down the town hall here.
Yeah, there's no state reps joining this walk, so you don't need a police officer.
All right, so February 11th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, moving on to the next item. Workshop number 2, to discuss the wording of Article 19, Independent Adult Community Overlay District in relation to HB 1661, Section 72. George?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
With
this
Mr. Buckley.
a little bit more of a challenge. Well, I won't say challenge. We had our first workshop back in December on this. Let me get the minutes, 1 minute, because I think I can go to the... Just bear with me for a second, please. Okay, we had a workshop back on December 7th for some of the folks that weren't here. So let me just quickly point out what the board asked staff to do at that meeting. So for tonight, the board asked the planning staff to clarify whether the town is preempt from legislating workforce housing as a result of this House bill, which John O'Connor is familiar with, which is House Bill 1661. And the second question is whether under the Fair Housing Act, the town can include its current wording and how it can address the workforce housing based on our adult 55 and older zoning. So since that time, we reached out, and I know it's kind of wordy, but it's worth reading. We reached out to Attorney Steve Buckley from the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We asked him those 2 questions. He gave a very detailed answer. I don't know how you want to read this into the record or whether we want to talk about we can break it into 2 sections. Let me go to the first one.
So the emails are going backwards, right? Yeah, backwards in time.
Yeah, let me start with the first one, which would be dated January the 10th. You see my question to Attorney Buckley. If you go to the second, page 3, where it says January 10th, I forwarded the question to him.
Is that on the density bonus?
Yeah, let me, just for the folks at home, can I just read his answer, the first one for the record? Because I know people at home are asking. Right, we had asked Attorney, for the people at home, we have an existing independent adult overlay district, which is traditionally 55 and older housing, and how was that impacted in any way to the House Bill 1661? And we had the question. So Steve's answer to the first one was House Bill 1661 does not prevent the town from regulating the location of workforce housing. The statutory duty imposed on the town of Derry to provide reasonable and realistic workforce housing development opportunities was not modified by the passage of House Bill 1661. Under RSA 674-59, Roman numeral 1, the town shall allow workforce housing to be located in a majority, but not necessarily by all of the land that is zoned to permit residential uses within the municipality. That mandate was not modified by House Bill 1661. So thus, within that mandate, the town of Derry may decide where it wishes to permit workforce housing, provided workforce housing is permitted in a majority of the land area zone and to permit residential areas. What House Bill 1661 did do is implement a new provision under RSA 674:17, Roman numeral 4, as follows. If a municipality allows an increased density, reduced lot size, expedited approval, or other dimensional or procedural incentive under this section for the development of housing for older persons, as defined and regulated pursuant to RSA 354-A:15, Roman numeral 8, it may allow the same incentive for the development of workforce housing as defined in RSA 674-58, Roman numeral 4. Beginning July 1st, 2023, incentives established for housing for older persons shall be deemed applicable to workforce housing development. If I interpreted Derry's current zoning ordinance correctly, the town permits a density bonus of 1.5 units over the underlying ordinance density, over the underlying zoning ordinance density requirement for elderly housing units on town water and sewer. In order to comply with House Bill 1661, the town will now need to extend that very same density bonus to workforce housing. So based on that, House Bill 1661 did not impact what we currently allow under the housing, the way we interpret that. John, you told us that there is legislation currently before the House to look at that bill again. There's various bills out there to change it.
Yeah, I had sent Dave Curran a complete analysis of how we got from HB 1661 and what it was for the last 3 or 4 years, and how it became part of the omnibus bill on Section 72.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair or George, I guess my question is, are we currently allowing workforce housing in a majority of our zones? Because that is also what he's saying. So I know we have it, but is it in a majority of our zones?
Yes, the 55, the independent living, we allow it in the residential zones. So if you're on town water and sewer, you get a density. So as an example,
55, I'm saying the workforce, so that's different, right? Or no, this is saying that we have to give the same bonus to workforce as our over 55, but it also says we can restrict it in certain zones, but it has to be allowed in a majority. So I'm saying, is a majority
yes,
more than 50%, I guess? So we allow workforce housing currently in a majority of our zones.
in our residential zones, right?
Okay, thank you.
So just a real quick example, like the release that you did for the escrow tonight for Dana Redmond, the developer that Shino wrote, that's 55 and older. He has town water and sewer, so he was able to get the density of the 1.5. If you look at the southern part of town on Goodyear Road on the Windham line, if you're heading southbound, take a left. On Goodyear Road, it's called Indian Hill. There's a very nice development. They're 2-bedroom townhouses. Those are age restricted to 55 and older because you don't have, obviously, town water and sewer down there. But we allow all of them in the residential districts.
So they did not get the density bonus, even though they're the same type of development as what you were saying?
That's correct,
Gotcha.
yeah. And I think in the way we just thinking out loud, if you look at Attorney Buckley's comment at the top of that page 3, that bill, House Bill 1661, is really trying to give communities incentives to allow it. So in our case, we're ahead of the game because we said, if you have town water and sewer, you can get 1.5 acres. That's 1.5 units. That's an incentive that bill is trying to address. It's really forcing some of these communities that don't have the housing that Derry has to make you have that kind of housing.
But just so I'm clear though, the elderly housing that we have, the RSA 354 thing, we also have that same bonus for the workforce housing, which is this RSA 674. I know we have it for the elderly, but do we have it for this workforce?
Technically, no. Technically, no. Right now, we don't have, some communities have called workforce housing. It's the wording workforce housing in your zoning. We don't have that. And what this bill was saying, by July 1st, you'll have to do it.
Okay.
So,
It'll mirror.
Gotcha.
yeah. I mean, legally, to get into the housing real quickly, we've always felt, and it's in a report for the Regional Housing for Southern Hampshire Planning Commission, Derry and Manchester, just by the nature of their older communities with utilities, we exceed the regional share of what today they call workforce housing. So we have every conceivable housing type that you have, and I had to do this for the state. You can have a 3-acre lot, which we call $750,000 houses, and believe it or not, in Derry and East Derry, out on Hampstead Road. We allow single-family, duplexes, multifamily, apartments, condos, mobile homes, elderly housing, 55 and older. We have town water and sewer lots of 10,000 square feet, which is affordable. That's really your workforce housing lot size, all the way up to 3-acre zoning. So the state came back and said, Derry is one of the few communities in the state that provides the diversity of the different kind of housing that they're trying to force this workforce housing under that bill in the state.
The other problem we had when we started looking at this here, because of 1661, you'll see when you look at some of the verbiage that Liz put together and crossed out, that we had age restriction. And so there was another issue that there was the dual function by looking at this one here. And the federal government is not concerned about age restriction. The state is concerned about age restriction. So one way or another, we had to put it in there.
Well, I guess that's my question, though. Are we trying to use this independent adult community overlay district for both purposes now? Oh, you know, we're saying that this is also our workforce, because workforce would not have an age, but to me, independent adult community would, right? Maybe I'm confused. Sorry.
Whatever the dimensional area is, but in July, we're going to have to mirror the adult.
Okay.
With the workforce housing, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, depending on how we decide to come down on this, either way, I think it would be a mistake to have one provision in the zoning ordinance that tried to cover both
Right.
and try to make it universal. All 1661 is saying is whatever sweet deal you cut for baby boomers, you have to cut it for people who need workforce housing.
Right.
Doesn't have to be the same district name. It can be in slightly different portions of town, again, as long as it covers most of the districts where residential uses are allowed. And I think if we try to craft one document that covers both, we'll be tangling words to the point where it becomes unmanageable. So I would suggest that given that we have a mandate to do something affirmative by July 1, or it gets forced upon us in a cumbersome way, that we look at our adult housing provisions and see if they still meet the needs of citizens in that age group and that demographic in our community. And then we look at workforce housing and see what the requirements are there. Now, I sense a disconnect between the Regional Planning Commission's statement that Manchester and Derry already have their fair share and what 1661 says, you have to have, equal opportunity for everyone regardless of what you have now. So, I would suggest that we start working on two different aspects of this. And my understanding is that the issue with the adult housing is compliance with fair housing and what is and what is not discriminatory. What can we require?
Yeah. And David, I apologize. I didn't. Yeah, that report was from a while ago. I shouldn't put that two together. Meaning the Planning Commission. That was a report that was done years ago. But hard to believe, but the numbers have not changed in our two communities. But I shouldn't say it's more current. It's a previous report. So thank you for pointing that out.
So following along, So following along what Mr. Nelson just said, and trying to understand the pack in front of us, so Liz, with the red lines on the current independent adult community, are those red lines that we need to make for the independent adult community, even if we're not trying to make this work for workforce housing? Or were you giving us a sample of what would need to be stripped out, and then we could reuse this language for a new district if we just change that language? I'm a little confused on what this...
This would be strictly for adult housing.
So, and you're saying we need to change some of this language. Why? Because it doesn't conform? Like the 18-year-old thing down the bottom, why do we have to strip out prohibiting occupancy for more than a certain period of time or whatever?
Under the state fair housing, we, in order to prohibit people under the age of 18, the ordinance should have that 80-20 provision, and we don't have the 80-20 provision in our ordinance.
Even in adult community? I guess what I'm saying is this is focused now just on the over 55.
Just housing for elderly persons, yes. So
And because we don't have 80-20, we have to allow the 18-year-olds to stay as long as they want?
we're sort of illegal because we say you can't be there.
And are those communities allowed to covenant that in their homeowners associations or anything? Because that's the whole purpose of over 55.
Written into the association, has to be written to an agreement.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole idea of over 55 is that you're not wanting families moving in there, so this kind of takes that away, which...
Yeah, so we should have that 80-20 provision in our ordinance.
Okay,
Because otherwise, it's familial discrimination under state law.
okay.
But I will say, Mark, if I real quickly may bring this up, and this happened, because it did happen, Mark. For some of you who may remember the Bunker Estates project on Ford Way, as you head southbound at the four-way intersection on the right, that started out, that was the first 55 and older. Dave will remember this. And under the law, we had the attorney here saying you had, and Chase Mill is the other one that applied. 80-20 was 80% of the units had to have just one individual in that unit to be 55 and older. The other 20% was open to the open market. So when you go to Chase Mill, some of those units of the total amount were open to anybody at the time, if I recollect how they marketed those. That's the same thing that happened on Ford Way. Excuse me. 10, 15 years later, what happened is what Mark just said. The condo association came back on Bunker Estates on Ford Way and said, we're older, and they wrote up a legal document. They were mostly in their 60s and 70s, retirees that said, we don't want anybody under 18 years of age. So they had an attorney write condo documents. Our attorney reviewed it. So now they put in their condo documents over, at least the last time I remember, was you can't have anybody there under 18 years old.
Because I think what I'm concerned about is, I know in Massachusetts when I was down there, I was involved in the town of Chelmsford, basically, they had the Chapter 40B, and so they were able to come in and build affordable housing or whatever in anywhere they wanted, basically. So they're coming into single-family housing, putting in apartment buildings. And like they said, they had that rule, it could be for over 55 or whatever, but it was only for the first generation. So, they had to maintain the cost. So people would buy them, move in, they would then be able to sell them at market rate to anybody, and then that workforce housing now came off of the rolls of the town, and they had to build more because that was no longer workforce housing or elderly housing. So it became a cycle that was a problem with the way they had that word, and I'm wondering if us stripping this out is causing similar situation.
I think, go ahead, Randy. I've been talking too much.
So on that 16546, to what Liz was saying, this is almost null and void the way it's written without the 80-20, because as it says, one person aged 55 or older. So a family buys it, grandma lives there for a year, she passes, now you've got an entire family in a 55 and older community.
Yep.
And the person that's 55, so what do? Throw them out? Because now, by our ordinance, they can't be there, but they bought it. So what do? So I agree with Liz. I think the 80-20 has to be in there, because how do we enforce this the way that we have it written?
Well, that's code enforcement. On a yearly basis, code enforcement is supposed to
But
verify.
code enforcement's not going to go knock on the door and say, hey,
Supposed
there's
to.
nobody here 55, you got to get out. It's
Well, so
According to Buckley's letter,
there's another letter from Buckley about this issue, and maybe you ought to read that, because he actually explains how the associations themselves have to enforce it.
Yep. Dave, do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
I'll be happy to read it.
Okay, thank you. You're the secretary. Thank you.
Under RSA 354:15, Roman 8, there is an exception to the anti-familiar discrimination prohibitions contained in the Fair Housing Act. Consistent with the Fair Housing Act amendments of 1988, it is permissible to authorize housing that limits capacity to certain age categories for old persons defined as follows. 1, provided under any state or federal program that the Secretary of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development determines is specifically designed and operated to assist elderly persons as defined in that program. 2, intended for and solely occupied by persons 62 years of age or older. 3, intended and operated for occupancy by persons 55 years of age or older, and sub A, at least 80% of the occupied units are occupied by at least one person who is 55 years of age or older. Sub B, the housing facility or community publishes and adheres to policies and procedures that demonstrate the intent required under this subparagraph, and subparagraph C, the housing facility or community complies with rules adopted by the Commission for Verification of Occupancy, which shall, sub I, provide for verification by reliable surveys and affidavits, and sub II, include examples of the types of policies and procedures relevant to the determination of compliance within the subparagraph. So it sounds to me that there's 3 things you could have, and they're ors. You can, 1, comply with a federal program. 2, intended for solely occupied by people 62 years of age or older. Or if it's 55 or older, then it's the 80-20 split, and then the housing organization, whoever runs that, has to provide the compliance according to the subparagraphs. So there's really sort of 3 choices.
Mr. Connors?
So this mentions the Commission for Verification of Occupancy. Is that something that we are supposed to have at the town level? Is that a regional state thing? What is that?
They're supposed to provide, they provide code enforcement officer the surveys, if you will, of their association makeup. So code enforcement, it's particularly at the beginning of these, on a yearly basis, would get a report from the condo development and say, here's what the demographics are of that development.
But this specifically calls out a quote-unquote Commission for Verification of Occupancy. That sounds to me like some sort of a town commission, or where is this commission?
We don't have that. I mean, I don't.
Because that's what this base, what David just read, if you look at the bullet down below where he says he understands that Derry is concerned with Category 3, that second one says the housing facility or community complies with the rules adopted by the Commission for Verification of Occupancy, which shall, and then it says provide for surveys and blah, blah, blah. And it's mentioned up above where you read it before.
Right.
C, the Commission of Verification of Occupancy. So are we also having to create some sort of town commission now to deal with this?
Mr. Nelson?
Here's a wild idea. Going forward, okay. Wild idea. Going forward, given the state of the economy, given the state of retirement savings, given the fact that a lot of people are working later into their nominal retirement years before they actually consider retirement, might we take advantage of option 2 and have a 62 years of age or older provision, which, if I read the attorney's letter correctly, is intended for and solely occupied by persons in that age bracket with no 80-20, no subparagraphs, no nonsense.
You're correct on that, on the 62 and older.
I mean, a lot of us are, are getting that age, and the whole age demographic for people who might be moving into these, total retirement communities, if that's the word, where they, don't have to do as much, outdoor work and have smaller, they can downsize and all that stuff. I'm not saying we replace the 55 and older, but would it be sensible to add a 62 and older, given that it's not so contentious in terms of enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, that's an option because, I mean, things change. I mean, look what's happening. I mean, you can't predict these things, but with COVID, I mean, we had this discussion today at a planning meeting that people are either, we're talking about a planning meeting about workforce housing, how it's affecting the economy, what happened with COVID, that we can't find help. People are quitting or they're working from home. It's hitting on so many levels. So we had a economic development discussion today about that. I think what COVID's done is some of the people are never going to come back. That's what we will come. They're going to stay home, or they retired early, and they're not all 62, David. You know, they're hitting 60 years old, and they're saying we don't want to go back in the office anymore. We're burnt out. It's hitting everybody. I mean, restaurants. So we were saying this may be the future, in terms of like people don't want to be in the workforce for whatever reasons. It's if you can hit 60, 62 now, people are retiring much earlier, and they're just dropping out. I'm generalizing, but that's happening.
Look at Randy.
I am. I'm all set.
To Mr. Nelson's point, from all of this that I've dealt with in the past, 62 and over is you can have it solely 62 and over. For the 55 and older developments, I believe it was federal law or even state. I believe it was federal because it's in other states. You had to have the 80-20 rule and allow 20% to not be 55 and older. So I agree with you that at least put that 62 and over in there, because I'm not sure we can circumvent the 80-20 rule in the 55. I believe that's federal law, that is.
And if we put it through a couple of the workshops,
Yeah.
then we go to a public hearing.
Right.
And see if there's any outcry.
Right, exactly.
Whether it be the
I agree with
builders-
Mr. Nelson on that. I think it's not a wild idea. I think it's a worthy idea.
So when they say solely 62, Randy and Dave, does that mean both people in a relationship, or again, one of them has to be 62? Because it says solely, so.
I believe both have to be, the way the law is written, I believe both have to be.
Oh, everybody does.
Yeah.
Both.
Can I just follow up, Mr. Chairman, Mark's question, going back to the condo, how they're in compliance? If you look at the current ordinance on the 55 and older on page 4, I'll just read one paragraph. And this was again, Mark, when we did this many years ago with, based on legal review, the top says, small letter A, assurances of independent adult residency. So drop all the way down to small Roman numeral 2, and we wrote that in based on the legal advice. Annual verification of compliance with the age restrictions by reliable surveys and affidavits. Notices of the results of the annual verification process is to be provided to the code enforcement administrator. Bob Mackey gets those reports, but in the real world, again, we're not knocking on people's doors to see who's living in those units.
Okay, thanks.
But there is a log. Bob's office does get that.
Interesting.
What do we want to do?
Well, I guess we need to make the 55 and older compliant with both state and federal law. And so whatever caveats and exceptions and carve-outs we need to put in there, we need to put in there. Maybe it's worth proposing, in addition to that, 62 and older for developers who might want to take advantage of that and make it permissible. And then I think we have to decide what we want to do about workforce housing, assuming that it's going to come to us in an unwelcome and unscripted way if we do nothing. And so I think we, potentially have a third set of provisions for workforce housing. We have 55 and older, we have 62 and older maybe, and then we have one for workforce housing. I think based on all of the things I hear, I think Mr. Soros just hit on some of them in terms of people not joining the workforce, not being able to find places to live in the communities where they want to work. Regardless of whether Derry has its fair share or not, I think the planning board has an obligation to figure out whether there's a community need to be met. I mean, that's kind of what the master planning process is for, right? We figured out what the community needs are, what we need to protect, what we need to provide, what we need to encourage. There is, I think, clearly a community need to provide appropriate housing for elders. Our demographic is aging. And I think based on all of the things I hear about employment problems, there may well be a community need to provide maybe even more workforce housing than we have. I know that it's politically sensitive. There's the perception that it is tax negative. And so we have to work through all those things. But I would like to honestly and openly ask the question, do we in Derry and you know, maybe surrounding communities have a community need for more workforce housing?
I would want to say that if workforce is defined as people like me, you don't have enough housing.
Well, I read there is a definition in the zoning ordinance of workforce housing. Now, we don't have provisions for it, but we have the definition already.
So, Mr. Chair, so on the current independent adult community, the red that Liz has put in here is because that is currently non-compliant with law, it sounds like. So those are just suggestions the planning department is indicating we need to make anyway because we're, you know, out of alignment. So do we at least make a motion to accept or, you know, get that squared away and then worry about, like Dave said, maybe we need to add a 62, but we have to have a lot more discussion about that. And we definitely, it sounds to me like need a workforce housing, which is going to, again, take some more time. So do we at least get compliant with what we have?
Well, on page 1, number 3, with the red line, and it says, and have less impact upon the public school system, I'd like to leave some of that in there and say, of residential developments and monitor the public school system for potential increase in student population, something to that effect.
I just was assuming that has to be struck because it's not allowed. It sounded to me like is that incorrect, or can we have anything related to limiting public school impacts, or is that not kosher?
Not that I could see.
Well, I think that was, those are justifying clauses. They're motivating clauses.
You know what, David, it's coming back to you, David, I'm sorry to interrupt, but maybe you will remember, maybe Randy, but when we did the original 55, I think the school comment was made because
This is part of the GMO.
yeah, the schools, you got to remember, we were overcrowded back. This ordinance goes back a solid 20 years. The schools were overcrowded, so Barker School wasn't built.
Impact fees.
Impact fees, we had growth ordinance, we had building cap permits. So the thinking was, again, as you see how things change, if we do 55 and older, in theory, there's not going to be as many kids coming out of those developments. That will help the school system. So that's why that was put in there. It's coming back to me now.
That's not the case now.
Yeah, now,
Yep, okay.
now that's not the case. Here we are 20 years later, and there's more room in the schools, generally.
That's true.
So I guess my question is, do we have a time frame where we have to get compliant with what we already have? Or it sounds like we're running a stray of
End of
laws.
July?
Well, that's for the workforce housing thing. I'm saying am I incorrect in that what we have right now in our independent adult community is not aligning with law?
It's not aligning with the law, and if someone brought in an application
Right.
today, we're not in
Right.
compliance, and if
So let's rectify
something
where our
weird
problems are.
happened, they could appeal it to the Housing Appeals Board, and we
So my suggestion is that we review the verbiage in the letter from Attorney Buckley, which I think already largely mirrors what we have, and in the ways that it doesn't mirror for what we call the option 3, that we make it comply to the attorney's advice and use that as our working draft going forward.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. That will put us in compliance, and Attorney Buckley's excellent. We rely on him for his knowledge, so.
Second.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
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 I like it.
On the other topics, I know we don't like to do, I know people don't, some people love subcommittees, some don't. Can we get a couple people that have the time to work with staff on some of this other stuff?
What else we got coming up?
Well,
We got a list.
We have a list.
I don't have it with me.
Farm-based housing is not.
Well, we won't talk about
We're not going for
form-based.
farm-based housing.
We have a list of things that we need to do over the next, as our goal for the next 6 months or so. So if there's a couple of board members that are
Well-
tired or have the time that would like to work with the staff.
Keeping, in mind our august leaders on the town council, they usually set goals for themselves for the year in January. Maybe the planning board ought to do that as well.
Yeah, we have a list. Yeah, John and Liz and I go over the list. So John did that,
Town council the other day.
he went to the council last week.
Well, maybe you should present it to the planning board.
Didn't that go up? Everybody get a copy of that?
No.
Oh, no, but I'll send it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who's not here
I'm
tonight?
thinking in a workshop, we maybe ought
Nominate
to
them.
officially adopt
Seriously.
our goals and priorities
three.
for the year, and then we know, we can
have
tell
three
George,
people.
yeah, we want to work on these and not that.
No, it sounds worse than it is because
After the election?
some of it's just,
Town council.
I won't use the word housekeeping. That's probably not a good word.
Don't we usually do the goals and objectives in April, after the election?
Yes, yeah, but we need to start on some stuff. I mean, so we have a list of things we probably should get going on.
Jimmy Mack loves a
You and I
subcommittee. Put
talk-
him on it.
I'll bring my red pen, and you and I will.
I mean, and I know you're all busy, and I know some people don't want other extra nights. So can anybody come during the day?
Well, I have the ability to come during the day, but I don't know what the list is.
We'll
So-
get you the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have it's kind of like, because you might have an interest in one thing that you really like or something
Maybe.
you don't like. So we'll get you the list, and maybe at our next meeting, we can start picking people that want to work on certain
Has
things.
Abbott Court come out of Supreme Court yet?
No,
Still up there.
no, it's still there.
So for clarification, would you like me to compile that list and email it to the board members prior to the next meeting, or bring it to the next meeting?
I'd say prior, so that'll give people a chance to think about it. You can put it in the list, 1 through 10.
Randy's retired now. He's got time.
Knew that was coming.
It reminds me of that song from the Mikado, where the high executioner is singing about, I've got a little list.
It's not so little.
Yeah.
And the next meeting is,
Next meeting is our regular Wednesday, February 1st, the next 2 weeks from tonight. So,
Okay.
that, again, all right, so going back, we're doing the sidewalk February 11th at 9 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
anybody else, board comments? Anybody?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? We are adjourned. Thank you all.